morning, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Training, a podcast brought to you by Train4Success and McGraw-Hill Conversations. Today, we'll be talking about a capstone project organized by the Fraser University School of Business and Laive, a dairy products company based in the country of Peru. This capstone project was organized in collaboration with Train4Success. Today, we'll talk with Jason Ho, the professor of the course, Garry and Thomas Khant, who were students of the class that took on this project. Professor Jason, could you please introduce yourself to the public?
Yep, sure. Thank you very much, Sara, for having me and the two fantastic students today. I'm Jason Ho. I'm a faculty member in the marketing area at BD School of Business, Fraser University. And in terms of like teaching, and I guess the most relevant course that to this is the analytic capstone course. So I've been teaching the analytics capstone course for more than 10 years. So we always sort of have like industry partners providing projects for the students and creating what I call ambiguity for students to handle. Because in most typical coursework, students pretty much just like here's an assignment, very clear rubrics, and do it. And there is a model answer in the backs of like mind of that professor. You don't have any of that in the analytic capstone project course. So I think this is like very cool. That's why I love it. I've been doing it for a while, and yeah, that's kind of me.
Oh, thank you, Professor. It seems like your course really inspires young adults to go more into the field and have actual in-person experience and kind of get that kickstart to their careers. I would like to hear about the both of the students, Garry and Thomas. Can you please, Garry, introduce yourself and tell me what you study, how you chose to study it, and how was your mindset going into the course?
Of course, yeah. So thank you so much, Sara, for having us. My name is Garry. I am a recent grad of the BD School of Business in MIS and Operations and Management. I had the opportunity to take the data analytics course with Jason Ho just this past, towards the end of 2025. Going into that course, I wasn't exactly what to expect outside of it being a capstone project, but I am very glad that I did take that course simply based off the fact that we did get to work with those companies, and like the professor mentioned, that ambiguity that comes around with it. I think it really put us in a situation where we couldn't just rely on those sort of framework of how school had been up until that point. We had to sort of step outside that and almost work like a real company. I would assume, honestly saying, we probably were like a real company for those couple of weeks when we worked together. Just that communication, the obviously getting the product out, but also performing for that client. It's all pretty stressful, but I think something that, at least for me, did really help sort of paint the picture of what the real life looks like, but also how to manage those problems, and again, most importantly, how to deliver to the client as well.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Garry. Thomas, could you please introduce yourself briefly and tell me how you chose to study what you study, and what your mindset was going into the course?
Hey, Sara, how's it going? I am glad to be here, and thank you for having us. Yeah, so I am a recent grad as well from SFU data science program, and during the program, I do have experience in data integration, and then I do have experience in software engineering as well. So before coming into the course, I never really had any professional experience with analytics, where you have to go back and forth between the stakeholders, because even in a software engineering context, your mentor or the technical lead is just giving you all the requirements. So you don't really need to go out and hunt down for the requirements, if you will. So going into the course, I know that we will be working with the stakeholders, but my expectation was that, oh, they're just going to give us everything with like a technical document, and then we'll be set. That was my expectation going in. However, I'm glad that it wasn't the case, because we actually we had like a couple of meetings where we're just sorting the requirements out. We have to go back and forth, and we have to, discuss with other team members. Oh, hey, like, do we want to take the project in this direction or that direction? And having to go through that, and is a very valuable experience. Yeah. So overall, I think I'm very glad to have taken this course, and thank you to Dr. Jason Ho for facilitating during this process. Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's a good introduction. Now I kind of have more, and the public has a bit more of a context of how this started and what kind of the context was set in. So as I understand it, this is a mandatory course for the degrees you guys were pursuing, right? Okay, so as a mandatory course, then obviously there's no way around it. And you were put in a situation where you just kind of had to figure out how to move forward, because you are assigned the company, or do you have a pick on the company?
We were assigned the company.
Assign the company, right? So it puts you on the spot, then you have to figure out everything basically. I guess from prior coursework that you guys had, it's more the question is more plainly said in a piece of paper. It tells you, okay, A, B, or C, or give me your response to this specific scenario. Now you guys are put into a situation, real life situation, where a real company has a real problem and they don't know you. And they're asking for your help as students. So I imagine there's a lot of, like you were mentioning, Thomas, a lot of back and forth. Now, I would like to go a little bit deeper into what the impact of this company being international was for your learning. How did it affect you guys? And please feel free to jump in, any of you.
Sure. Yeah. So working with a partner that's not only in a different continent but speaks a whole different language, it wasn't something that we assumed that it would be a little bit of a roadblock, or something to get around. Eventually it would make it a little bit more difficult, but we didn't realize how difficult it could be, just based off of the different cultures and sort of the perception on the conversations you have. A conversation that you might have in English, at the University of like Simon Fraser, it's completely different technically, as well as just how you perceive information, as it is in Peru. So it was definitely a roadblock getting around that. But once we sort of understood how our partners wanted to communicate, how they acted in certain information was presented to them, I think it did give Thomas and I and the entire team a little bit of a realization that we need to attack it in a completely different manner than we had initially had set out for. Um, with all that information, I think additionally, it really set us up for success in terms of long-term, conversations that we'll have outside of school and in that professional world as well. Because it allowed us to sort of understand exactly, the differences and those caveats that come with having conversations with different cultures and languages. So overall, I think it helped us out quite a bit. It was definitely a challenge, but a challenge that was definitely worth that time and effort.
Yeah, echoing on what Garry was saying. So, for instance, the first week of working with Laive is just us figuring out how to set up a translation system on Google from English to Spanish, and vice versa. So that was the first challenge. And then for the next ensuing weeks, we're just trying to figure out how we should communicate with them, because there was initially difference in approaches. We were going into the meeting expecting something, but Laive was coming into the meeting expecting something else. So there was an initial mismatch at first, but then we eventually come around, and we were able to work with them more effectively the weeks after. So yeah.
I see. So as you guys explain, this is really it was like an unexpected situation, maybe even more unexpected than other students might have had with other companies. Professor, I just wanted to know, did your students have other students have any experience with international projects like this with international companies?
No, this is actually the first time that we have, or at least in this analytics capstone course, this is the first time we had a industry partner outside Canada. Even I would say that or actually we have one that from Ontario. So outside the province is not necessarily brand new. But yeah, having like just like what Garry said, and also kind of like Thomas sort of referred to it, like the language barrier, the cultural sort of differences, it's just sort of like a very different. And but at the same time, I have to say, like so we got those like differences, challenges, barriers. At the same time, the issue remain the same.
Mm-hmm.
Industry partners most of the time cannot articulate what they want.
Yes.
Okay, to be fair, they can talk about what they want, but what they need may be different. So let's sort of separate what they need and what they want a little bit. And it is always a process when it comes to analytics products specifically. It is not just a strategy at a high level. It has to be something tangible, at least a dashboard like that which this team delivered, or some important like a system mapping of like suggesting a new process for them to do like collecting data and all. But all these deliverables tend to be something that like they can show to other people and then see, oh, this is the value that we got from the students. But it is hard to ensure that deliverables match what the industry partner like want or need. And it takes quite a bit of like trust, and it takes quite a bit of like convincing, and that I guess that's also part of the trust. And to some extent, like day one, I told students like them that like it's all about earning trust. You can deliver all you want. To some extent, in a typical course, your prof doesn't need to trust you. They just need to see whether it matched the model answer. But in real life or in most of the analytics professional situation, you got to earn trust from the person who paid the bill, from the person who hired you, from the person that like they would lose something if you screw up. And and then that's the challenging part. And of course, like having it like in a different country, like a different continent, it really make it like a lot more challenging. I have to say, I'm very proud of this team. These two in that team, like so it's not just sort of like they took the time to figure out what will be the best approach to earn the trust. They actually implement it. So they took time. Like this is kind of one thing that like afterwards we think, oh, that makes sense. That's sort of like no-brainer. But at the moment, like it was I think it was quite difficult, even for me to think of. When they have documents for Laive in Peru, they will translate it in Spanish beforehand. And then they have an English version, they have a Spanish version.
Right.
This to some extent, you will think, wow, that makes perfect sense now that you think about it. But I think I have to give them more credit that like they would actually think about what would be the best way to earn the trust.
Yeah.
And let's remove the language barrier. Let's reduce it as much as possible. And I think that really just kind of like obviously I don't speak Spanish, I don't read Spanish. I don't know how well the translation is. Like I guess all of us just rely on Gen AI for that. But at least, like if I put myself into the shoes of the industry partner, the fact that they put in the effort to not just kind of think about the deliverable, which is a technical part of it, but also handle the relationship part of the project. I think this is something I feel that the learning outcome is totally like, if there's a checkbox, I think that's totally a big checks, maybe 2 checks on that. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor. Well, yes, it sounds like it was a very big challenge, but I also believe that you guys probably gain a lot of good things on this process. Taking into account that Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada in general is such a multicultural country space. We have cultures clashing all the time, and we have to work together to make any progress. So the fact that you guys can start now and start in a company that you guys didn't know at all, I don't think you guys had experience with the industry either, or did you guys have experience with the milk?
No
No.
experience prior.
No experience with the industry. So it's such a big challenge, but you guys handled it. So I can tell you guys learned so much about it, so much from it. So I guess we have a few points now. We have the fact that there was a big language barrier. You don't know what they want, because in a capstone project, it's really hard, as the professor was explaining, to know what the client wants and what you can actually give the client. The difference between the value that you can give them versus what they think that it's better for them. I guess I also would like to know, how did you guys start to structure which kind of deliverables you guys were going to give to them? Was there like a specific deliverable that the course required of you, or did you guys like start making that like skeleton like from scratch?
Yeah, so it's definitely a little bit of both, because when we first received the project and the company, we were given this one document, and the document is to the deliverable of the document is that, okay, Laive has certain inefficiencies in their supply chain, and our job is to figure out a solution to address that. So it's kind of it's very broad statement. So first thing we did, so the week after, we had a meeting, and we started asking questions about what Laive actually want, and then we decided that, okay, I think Laive wants to know more about Canada's dairy industry. So that's what we did. For the ensuing week, we were just like researching on the Canada's dairy industry, and then we presented it the week after with that Spanish slides and the Spanish document that Dr. Jason was mentioning earlier. And yeah, so after that, I would say after that meeting, we kind of set up like a very structured deliverable afterwards. It become like we gained their trust, and it become way easier to work with them. So after that point, they want a dashboard for to view the farm, to view the milk volumes that come from their farms. They want the dashboard, and then they also want a report on Canada's dairy industry. So yeah, that's how we figure the deliverables out. And I believe Garry can also chip in on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Thomas hit the nail on the head there. At the beginning of that project, honestly, as a group, we were a little bit unsure of what the deliverable might look like for that client. We were under the impression that we were just trying to get information about the Canadian sector or industry of milk and dairy processing. When we got all that information together, we quickly sort of realized that there were actually more important questions that the partners were asking that we didn't have answers to, and that sort of redirected our entire focus on, like Thomas mentioned, that dashboard and those technical deliverables. We also, as a team, had a little bit of a difficult time grasping the idea that what we are now delivering isn't exactly what that initial sheet had mentioned. So getting everyone on the same page definitely honed into our teamwork and leadership skills. allowed us to sort of understand exactly where everyone was at and get everyone on the same page. But most importantly, we had to sort of communicate those changes over to Laive as well. So thankfully, through some of the systems that we had access to, as well as translation, that process did become a lot easier for us. But eventually, we did focus in on getting over some reports to them, which took in all that information that we did work on initially, in addition to external and additional research. We put it all together for them so they can revisit that information in following years whenever they are interested in moving forward with our recommendations. And in addition to that, the dashboard that Thomas mentioned, it was a dashboard that we created in-house, did not get any help from anyone outside of our group. And it was a integration with their existing SAP database. But because their existing database was for the milk they had already collected, our dashboard and app was actually taking the milk when it was picked up from the farm and delivered to the processing center. So it was allowing them to get an overview of exactly where the milk was coming from, how good that milk was, and all that information that was important to them, such as those KPIs. But yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, it seems like you guys found like their most important pain points in their process, and then eventually you, based on the context of the industry here, you were able to see what the advantages that Canada had could be implemented in the Peruvian industry. That seems like you guys gave a lot of value to the company. I would like to know, what was the part of the project that excited you the most, or that you were most inspired or motivated to do?
I'll just quickly chime in on this. For me personally, it was definitely that the application / dashboard creation that we did. Because that's something I've done outside of the class and also just do it in my own professional world. It was something that I was excited to like be able to showcase to an actual company, to do it especially in a school setting where a lot of the times you want to sort of be that person that brings forth a pretty cool product or an idea. And it was nice sitting in front of the professor as well as some of the classmates that we had worked with, and quite ultimately the partners. And to put forth that idea and to put forth something that you thought about, in a small conversation with the group members, and then worked on endlessly outside of that. It was pretty rewarding, but also really motivating to have that opportunity and that platform to present.
For me, it's more of a research side of things. So over the course of 3 months, so we reached out to some officials in the Canada dairy industry. So we reached out to Lectinet, we reached out to Dairy Trace, and then some more other organizations to figure out the industry, to do more research on the industry. We did a lot of interviews on them, and then we have to come up with our own requirements of what they might want in a dashboard, and then we have to compile a dashboard. We have to compile a report, and yeah, I would say the research side of things is what I'm interested in the most. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool, really interesting. I do want to know. So you guys were in this at the beginning, at this crossroads. You are meeting with this company that doesn't speak the same language that you do, that have a problem that it's hard to understand without the context. You don't really have the experience prior to this course onto the industry, so then you decide to start researching. Um, if you were back to when the project started, what would you tell yourself your first steps should be?
It's a good question. Um, I think if I'm looking back at it now, I would say to sort of understand what the deliverables are and also what's expected as a group first. I think throughout that project, there was a lot of times where a lot of us are heading in different directions. Um, and I think if we were to limit the amount of redos that we did in terms of just getting everyone on the same page and attacking that problem, I would definitely say sit down with the group a little bit more intensely, um, and just really get down and deep understanding of exactly what's expected of us.
Good. Thomas, do you have anything to add?
Not much, but but I would only add this. So the question is what I would tell myself if I'm starting out again, right? Yeah. So what I would tell is to just so for the first meeting that we have with Laive, I do believe that they were under the impression that we are gonna give them a presentation on Canadian dairy industry, and I will I will probably get everyone on board to do research on the Canadian dairy industry first before getting into the first meeting, but we did not know that. So that was a little bit of a hiccup there at the very start. So yeah, I would probably work on that if I were to start over again. Yeah.
Good. I mean, I'm imagining that now that you guys are going into the, after your program, that now that you know this, it'll be much easier for you guys to go through that initial part of aligning with the customer, making sure they know that you can offer something and that you they can actually tell you, this is what we want, and kind of like explore within, kind of have like that connection that the professor was mentioning, the earning the trust.
Yeah.
Which obviously a language barrier would always put a difficulty into that path. um so how did you guys set up your own expectations for the project quality at the end? Did you guys have like a okay, let me rephrase this. Did you guys have a final deliverable?
We did have a final deliverable, which is the report and the dashboard, if that's what you're asking.
Yes. Okay, so then you had a final, this is what we
Yeah.
gave you, and like a presentation of, okay, this is all we've done with you, basically. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if you could improve on it, do you guys know what you would like to add to that? Let's say Laive wanted to ask you to become a full-time consultant for the company. What would your next steps be after this first capstone project?
I think this was again based off of the work that I did in a group. So a lot more with the actual integration of like the application. I would say if they were to bring me on, my mind immediately shifts to actually finding real integration into their existing systems because we weren't actually given a lot of information or raw data that we could have used from Laives and the Peruvian market side of things to actually enhance the system. We had to do a lot of mock data, and we made files on files of this mock data. So for me, immediately, it would be to actually work a little bit more closely with the technical side and the technical team, on their company, because it would allow for us to sort of enhance those products and also those recommendations. Um, in terms of the research we did for the Canadian market, I think also the realization that those two markets are like completely different in terms of the outlook of them. So if we had a bit more of that conversation, a bit more in-depth conversation about, why these two different areas don't align with one another, I think that would have helped out not only them, but our team and sort of the deliverables and the expectations that we had for ourselves.
Yeah, so echoing on what Garry was saying. So yeah, so the two industries are so very different. For instance, in Canadian industry, to like the farms use RFID tags to track the cows, but whereas in Peru they do not have that. So there are like the fundamental differences in two industries. So our first the next step, if we were to hire as a consultant, would be to bridge the gaps, but like bridge the gaps and have more in-depth conversation on how to implement this dashboard and how to make it more feasible. That would be our first step.
Nice. Well, good to know. Uh, I am also curious. Did this project make you more interested in maybe the dairy industry or consulting as a profession, or maybe working with Latin American companies, or in international projects in general, do you think this experience had an impact where you might want to pursue something you touched on this project in your professional life?
I would say to a point, to an extent, for sure. I think not to say like I'm ruling out consultancy as a whole, but I think that was definitely something that I enjoyed, like working with problems and trying to find solutions, but in a more like collaborative and I guess communicative way. That was definitely nice, and especially working with the team, you just get so many different like ideas and thought processes that it really makes it difficult to put all of them together to give a solution, but at the same time makes it so easy. I don't know if that makes sense. But I think for me, the international business side of things definitely stood out. Um, Not just pertaining to Peru only, but just in international business as a whole. I think we as like students, but also just professionals, get caught up so much in our own environment that we forget to understand that there's a completely different outlook on things in a different continent. And that in the end of the day just hones in on our skills even more. So that definitely for me was of interest because what we learned with working with a Peruvian company is I don't think something that would come so easily working with a Canadian one. And those lessons that we learned were definitely valuable for sure.
Yeah, so personally for me, I now know the most amount of dairy facts in a dinner party. So, that's a plus in my book. But personally, I do really enjoy learning about systems and the processes in place where, so in Canada, right, from the farm level all the way to the customer, we get to learn the processes that um that deliver from farm to the customer. So we really get to learn in depth how that works. So I really like the processes. So for me, consultancy, I would say I would consider it in the future just because of that aspect where you're just exposed to so many different industries and how the processes work. And for me, that's a huge interest of mine. So yeah, I am definitely interested in that. And yeah, I would say that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. It seems like this experience was really fruitful. Now, my next question is for the professor, Professor Ho. How do you feel? How do you think this experience has shaped your students, maybe in a way that would have been different from a Canadian-centered company? Do you think it gave them different challenges? Do you think it built them up more, or just your opinion?
Uh, well, obviously, like the best answer would come from the students rather than from me. Um, Based on my observations, I would say this team definitely experienced quite a bit of challenges. But I would say pretty much sort of similar to other teams. Other teams would have their own challenges. As I said earlier, it's sort of like try to figure out what to deliver. And the deliverables have to be of value to the industry partner. Sounds easy, but it's actually very difficult. The whole process of figuring out the struggle, to some extent, the struggle is by design rather than a bug. We know that like students going to struggle, and to some extent, no matter what you do, like how much homework that you would have done before the first meeting, you will always have surprises. Um, and how you adjust, that's actually the process. So in this course, we emphasize something called like agile sort of like management process, or more like an entrepreneurial type of like language. We call it like a build, measure, and learn loop. So it's all about that, like quickly you deliver something, and then you can quickly know whether you're on the right path. If not, you pivot. And you do it earlier. And to some extent, I would say this team definitely like did very well. So are other teams. But I don't see that like they like this team particularly like more challenging than the other. It's just the nature of things that like when students from a business analytics program or the data science program, they would have an expectation that there will be always data first. Then they can just jump right into it and then get all kinds of things from the data, and then they just sort of share the result. And a lot of industry partners that we have right now, almost they don't have the data. So that's why they want you to propose like what data to collect. And then to convince them what data to collect, you need to show them that once you have that kind of data, you can do something with it, like the dashboard, that like the farmer management, like they're actually proposing a new process. This team proposed a new process to get more data at the time the Laive collected the milk, which is brand new. And to some extent, like it's hard for them to think about, for Laive, the industry partner, to think about, oh, should we invest in that? But they actually sort of like show that, hey, here's the dashboard, here's the kind of analysis that you can have. And they even have the, I don't know which page, but one of the tab, I don't know whether Garry has it like now, but probably don't want to show it here. And then you can actually change how you calculate the bonus based on the content and all start from you. Like Laive has to start like or change their measurement system. And that is something that, like, as I sort of like describe, you can see that, like, hold on, that team actually had no data. And how could you convince that? It's almost like chicken and egg, right? So they're not going to collect the data. They're not going to invest money in collecting the data until they can see the potential benefit.
Right.
And that's sort of like, I think that's why this course is in the business school. We like I mean, like we can have a capstone project course offered by our statistics colleagues, but then it will be a very different course because we will focusing on exactly that, like value come first. How can we help the industry partner see the value? And all the things that you mentioned, of course, like language and all, culture, global, like matter. But I guess I keep seeing that, like, that's very similar to all the other teams' situation. They all struggle, and to some extent, that's the design. Of course, that's also why some of the students, like I mean, like different students sort of adjust even within the same team. There are different students. Some students adjust to that kind of ambiguity. Some students adjust to this type of unstructured, like freedom, flexibility, and they have to do a lot more work. Like they need to take ownership of it. Like different students react differently, even within the same team. And then of course across different teams they would have that. And to some extent, when a student doesn't respond well to that kind of ambiguity, they actually will shut off. And it's not uncommon for me to see some students in the class, not necessarily the whole team, but like some students in the class, they will shut off because they just so used to that, like, here's an assignment, here are questions. Two of them will take you a certain time. You have 2 weeks to finish, and TA or the prof will have model answer to compare to. And they can ask lots of questions to the TA or the prof. This is almost like you can ask the industry partner, they may or may not answer that, or even they tell you something, you may not be able to convert it to something actionable. I would say even students who cannot adjust, I really hope that experience would, or that frustration of coming from that experience will help them next time they come across, and I guarantee that they will come across situation like there is an ambiguity goes, everything's a little bit like too flexible. and it can be frustrating. You cannot just ask ChatGPT what to do. You don't even know what to put into the ChatGPT. Um, and hopefully they remember that like there are other people in the same class managed to do it and rise up to the challenge, like the Garry and Thomas here. And then they kind of like learn a little bit from their peers. That's what I hope. And so I think it's the learning, like the question you ask is like the learning and all. I would say not necessarily just the end of the class, but maybe the learning would come like maybe 2-3 years down the road. A student that who, let's say, just picked that one that like didn't respond well to that kind of ambiguity, they kind of like shut off, like they didn't do too much, like they just kind of rely on other people to carry them. And I hope that like 3 years down the road that they pass through all this entry level thing, and then they start getting into a little bit more decision making role, and they will remember the experience that they had 3-4 years ago, and they may remember classmates or teammates like Garry or Thomas, and how they experiment different things, how they took risk to earn the trust. I think that's sort of like the what we think education should be. It's not just so much that the experience had to be successful, and you end up having a team that quite like turned out to be very successful. And the two people that like it's sort of like almost like a poster child for that success. But I also sort of speak for the people who may look back. They could have done a lot more, but I believe that like in future, when they come across similar situation, the learning will come back. That experience will come back. Even frustration, disappointment, regret will come back to fuel them. Like once they have seen that this is possible, and when they come across situation like that, they wouldn't be afraid of ambiguity. They would embrace it. They would actually like the fact that they can shape like what should be the deliverables, what will be the values, the boss, the client, or like some outside stakeholders would like to see, and takes convincing trust and all. So that's we believe or hope students will get out of this class.
Well, thank you, Professor. I think that really highlights why capstone projects are so important. It's like it helps the students dip their toes in the ocean, because they're gonna be stepping into the professional life. And as you mentioned, it doesn't have as clear of a structure as the assignments do. So for some people, it's gonna be hard. But the example of these students, Garry and Thomas, they really were challenged, and I would say, and you say too, that they succeeded. So it's a good inspiration for other students. And I'm pretty sure, probably, Professor, you're gonna be referencing their case, and for other students maybe that want advice in the future when they encounter their own difficulties in the path. I myself, as a student, I also did a capstone project, and the things that you guys mentioned, the how hard it was to communicate with the client, to understand what they wanted, to kind of tell them what they want is either not feasible or is not, you can't do magic, or you might need to formulate your problem question, or you actually don't need this, you don't need A, you actually need B. That back and forth, the negotiation is really good experience. And I'm glad to be talking to you guys and hearing how much you've learned from this experience. Just going back really quickly onto international capstones, Professor, would you recommend more classes and more universities implement these type of international challenges? Do you think this brings like an extra point in favor for the students once they finish for their CVs, for example?
Like a simple answer, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it. We live in a world that like geopolitical situation like shape a lot of things. Um, and it is very difficult to sort of like just sort of live in your own environment and you think about everything will be fine. Um, and the best way to experience that is try to create value for a person who lives like across the world, or an organization across the world. Um, but I also sort of want to acknowledge that it is very challenging. It is not as easy. We're lucky we got Edgar, who knows sort of Laive very well. Um, and there's a sort of like talk about trust. We have some kind of like carryover effect from, so Laive trust Edgar, Edgar trust us. And that's sort of like we are not sort of like starting from like, if you look at, if you can measure trust, we are not starting from zero or negative. Like sometimes if it's a total stranger, it can be like a bunch of Canadian kids sort of want to reach out to one of the like like established like dairy farms, like operators in Peru. I think it will be very hard. Right? We're lucky that like we got like intermediary like Edgar, kind of like they already trust built in. So we start off like, if this 100 is the max, I would say we already start with like 50 in terms of the trust level. Of course, like the trust level can go down. Maybe one point after the first meeting that the student had with Laive, they drop down a bit, but definitely they like that trust level kind of go up. And I think that's sort of like challenging. And courses like this without a clear structure, to some extent we have quite a bit of structure, but at the same time we cannot have too much structure. Otherwise, like there's no ambiguity. And that's also the part that I think not all the students respond well to courses without structure. They like, and also like an easy for a student to have like, even not just perception, indeed they may have a sort of like a experience worse than just taking a course. They may not, they could have learned more by taking a course with specific, like there's a weekly lectures and there are assignments and then they do it. They may have learned more that way for some students. And so I would say in general, yes, absolutely. We should have more courses like this to challenge students to work with industry partners from outside British Columbia, Canada, even speaking different language. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that it is very challenging. And to do it well, to some extent, I feel we got lucky. And can we replicate the success? That's the thing that like I think we still need to work on it. That may be the $1 million question for the education right now, the education sector. Like when we have so much focus on experiences, can we ensure the quality of the experiences are good for every single student? What we don't want to see is like there are 50 students going into the same experience. Only the top 20 would get the most out of it. And then the bottom 20 would feel totally turned off. And that's not necessarily a good experience. And it is challenging to ensure that that could happen. I mean, that's a different topic the other day, but like it's very challenging. Like I honestly don't have an answer to that. I'm still figuring things out. Using the whole idea of like build, measure, and learn loop. I'm still building every semester. I'm building, like measure it and learn from it.
Well, that's so awesome about teaching and learning and having like being in a university where you have the opportunity to talk to so many people from so many different backgrounds. It's like every situation is different, but you learn from like almost every interaction. So it's it's awesome. I find academia awesome. Um, well, I didn't talk about this with Edgar. I didn't say that I was gonna mention this, but I actually I was born and raised in Peru, and I used to drink Laive milk my whole life since I was little. It was in every store. Um, so this case really is like a nice thing for me to talk. I like talking about this topic because it makes me feel close to home. Um, uh, I guess I just want to end this interview with maybe remarks from you guys. What would you like to say to other students? Gary and Thomas, what would you like to say to other students that are maybe in the middle of a capstone project or are gonna take a capstone project on or are about to start their professional lives? Because the capstone project, as we were mentioning earlier, is like a small step into how the rest of the professional lives are going to look like if you're going into consulting and in general too. What would you guys like to say to people that are going into the same challenges that you guys went through?
Yeah, so for me, the advice I would give specifically when it comes to dealing with ambiguous requirements and stakeholders is to know that you have a say in how the deliverable is going to turn out as well, because like Dr. Jason said, the the client might not necessarily know what they want. So you do actually have to guide them along and direct them in a correct way, whatever that may look like for the both parties. So I would say that, hey, like you do have an agency over how the deliverable is going to turn out. So maybe show them what the final product could look like rather than just being passive and trying to get information out of the client. You just be more proactive in shaping the deliverable in a way that is beneficial for the both parties. So that would be my biggest advice for someone that is trying to take this course or working with the dynamic stakeholder for that case. Yeah. So that would be my advice.
I would say be a leader. A lot of the time, students will maybe feel a bit afraid or hesitant to go forth with, giving their input or their ideas. I think we need more leaders to step up and, lead the way forward. I think this way, not only are you you're doing yourself a justice as well, because in the real life, if you mess up, there are implications to it. But in a capstone setting, this is a time for you to fall over and over again because you have the resources around you to help guide you the right way. And when you're a leader, you're going to get most of those resources and the most impact, from the people around you. But I would also say take a step back as well in terms of don't get too caught up in, just one deliverable or one issue. Usually, when you take a step back and you look at it from a more macro perspective, it opens up more ideas and more solutions, which don't always seem like they're there when you're, so caught up in that one issue or etc. So those would be my two pieces of advice for any student that's interested in doing a capstone.
Thank you. Professor, maybe do you have a message for teachers that might be going through a hard semester where some students just get overwhelmed and they close off, or maybe for other leaders in academia that maybe want to step into giving their um, students more international projects? Do you have any recommendations for students themselves or anything you want to close with?
Um, I would say the world is ambiguous, and and this is the reality. And I think for students, particularly from the STEM, more kind of like data science or even a little bit like business analytics. So there's an illusion of like world can be quite like structural. Because that's how like anything can fit it into a regression model. Like
Mhm.
that could be like the misconception. And I think it is important to know that like this is very different, and it's okay. It's okay, and don't stress out about that. And if it's a school setting, like what Garry said earlier, like is a school setting, and you can fail. It's a kind of like a safe space, and even you really stress out about grades. I mean, like okay, so you score up in one course, so what, right? So, but if it's in professional world, like you screw up, that could be like a lot bigger consequence. And so just sort of enjoy it, and yeah, if like even if you cannot enjoy it at the moment, try to enjoy it more. Uh, and you will eventually enjoy it, because this is how the world operates. Nothing black and white. It's always a little bit ambiguous. It's always up to you as part of the actor in the system, that, like what Thomas said earlier, you can actually shape the outcome. Um, and this is actually the exciting part. And I guarantee that like everyone who can pass through the phase of fear of or overwhelmed by, like Sara, you mentioned that overwhelmed by the ambiguity and all. Once they can get through that stage, and then they get to the stage where they understand that like they is actually part of the process. They go co-creating the deliverables with the industry partner or boss and employers, whatever in the professional world. Um, this is actually very exciting. This is what human is all about. Like we do things to make the world better. Um, I just cannot imagine that anyone who don't enjoy that. So it will come. That's kind of how I see that.
All right, and with those words, I think we're ready to close the interview. First, I wanted to thank Professor. Thank you, Professor Jason Ho, for joining us. Thank you, Garry. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, all three of you, for giving me this interview. I think I really enjoyed this interview. It was really interesting to go into this topic. I will also like to thank the Simon Fraser BD School of Business and Train4Success and Laive for making this project possible. If not, then we wouldn't be talking about this. I think we'll all learn a lot from this experience, and I personally feel very, very happy that I was able to interview you guys. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're interested in learning more, visit train4success.ca. If you like this podcast, please give it a like and review. This really helps us find more people just like you. Train for Success is interested in bridging paths between cultures. If you're interested in this too, reach out to Train for Success to access networking opportunities. Thank you and have a good day.